Hello, I'm Janet Morena, Executive Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to our program. I bet you've heard a lot about Roe v. Wade. Maybe you didn't hear about Doe v. Bolton, but there were two decisions that day, Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton. And today joining me is a dear friend of our ministries and mine, and we both knew Roe and Doe personally, and we got exciting things to tell you. Joining me is Alan Parker, President of the Justice Foundation. Alan, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me on. It's great
Well,
to be
and of
with
course, we don't want to call them Roe and Doe. Roe is Norma McCorvey, and Doe is Sandra Cano,
you.
right?
That's right.
And we both personally knew them. Yes, they're the plaintiffs, but we knew them as our friends. They became 100% pro-life. Neither one of them had an abortion.
Exactly.
You know, so like there's certain facts that we still are beating the drum today about, right?
That's right. And both of them then eventually came out for the first time in American history. Two people who won landmark Supreme Court decisions went back to the Supreme Court to get their own cases reversed.
Their own cases, right?
Yes,
That's right.
and that's amazing.
Well, to talk about Sandra just for a minute, not only did Sandra not have an abortion, she fled the state to give birth to her child because she was being lied to and pressured by her mother and a social worker. And she signed paperwork thinking it was to gain the custody back of her children, right?
That's exactly right. I began to represent Sandra in the year 2000.
Wow.
And she'd already come out and had to fight on her own to let people know that she was the Mary Doe of Doe v. Bolton case.
Wow.
So they used a false name to protect her identity. But when she tried to say, I never wanted an abortion, her own lawyers fought her from being able to come forward and tell her truth.
Yeah.
She won that battle first, and then she, for the rest of her life, fought to say, like she told me when I first talked to her, she said, Mr. Parker, that case has been a doom on my shoulders ever since I got involved in it. And it created the health exception, which sounds so deceptively appealing. Well, shouldn't we have an exception for the life and health of the mother?
Right.
Sounds very appealing.
Oh, but health, Alan, as we know, is so broad. A woman could say to her doctor, I'm not psychologically fit to have a baby right now. Oh my goodness, I'm depressed. I'm this, I'm that. I mean, you know, health is like a wide open door to an abortion, right?
That's what Doe v. Bolton said. And it includes psychological well-being in health. And the only person who had to agree was her abortion-performing doctor.
Right.
So if she said, Doctor, I wouldn't be happy having a baby. Fine, I'll take care of you. Up to the moment of birth, that's what created abortion on demand. And if we allow the health exception across America, we'll have abortion on demand again for any reason the woman says, my psychological well-being would not be helped by having a child
right.
at this stage.
And then we have the Roe, Norma McCorvey, of course. First of all, when they kind of took advantage of Norma and had her sign for the case, she was already several months pregnant. They knew darn well they weren't going to be able to help her get an abortion in Texas. They knew that, but they were using her case, wasn't it? And you think about this, Alan, since when is someone a plaintiff and either one of these women appeared one day in court, right?
No, only by written affidavits at the time. And particularly in Sandra's case, going back, was true fraud on the court in her affidavit. She never wanted the abortion.
Right.
During the pendency of the case, they used the Georgia Therapeutic Health Exception statute to try to get her to have an abortion. They said, we've packed your suitcase, tomorrow you're going to the hospital. Because under Georgia law at the time, if 3 doctors said you needed an abortion for your health, you could get one. It was kind of a modern therapeutic abortion law.
Wow.
And of course, if you really wanted good health care, wouldn't 3 opinions be better than 1? But the Supreme Court struck down that law and said, no, it's only between the woman and her one doctor. So if he's willing to take her money and do the abortion, then he can have it. But the amazing thing was she took her suitcase and fled to Oklahoma during the pendency of the case because she didn't want to have an abortion.
Wow.
She said, Mr. Parker, it's a fraud on the court, and I've tried to clear my name. And by God's grace, we eventually, in the Gonzalez v. Carhart case, filed a brief on behalf of Sandra and 180 women hurt by abortion, and she was able to clear her name, and they upheld the federal ban on partial birth abortion because of Sandra and 180 women hurt by abortion who told them of the devastation killing their own baby caused them.
Wow. And so to go back to Norma for a minute, so Norma actually gave birth to what we call the Roe baby. It was actually her third pregnancy. She had two others that actually her mother was helping raise. And that created the whole controversy in baby number 3, because her mother said, hey, I can't raise any more of your kids. And that's why Norma was kind of thinking of the abortion, but never had it, gave birth, placed the baby for adoption, and then got basically taken advantage of even more by the pro-abortion industry. Because I always go back to the day, January 22nd, 1973. Now, if you're a lawyer, and if you just won for your client, what would you do? Would you pick up the phone and say, we won, right?
You would think.
You would think. But
she
not
felt-
Norma.
Yes.
No contact from Sarah Weddington or Linda Coffey. In fact, she found out by opening her Dallas home that day, bent down and picked up the Dallas Morning News, and there was the headline. That's how she found out. Now, doesn't that make people realize that there's something wrong here?
Yes, she felt very used by the legal system and her lawyers. And it's in the book because that we wrote about this issue. And she swore that she didn't know what abortion was. They didn't tell her. She said, it was like John Wayne saying, we're going to abort the mission. I didn't want to be pregnant. I was going to be unpregnant.
Right.
But of course, abortion was illegal, so she didn't get any counseling in Texas. And Sarah Weddington had gone to Mexico to get an abortion, but that was the only child that she would ever have. She died childless, and Sarah Weddington died 6 months before the highlight of her career, Roe v. Wade, was reversed by the Supreme Court.
Wow.
So it didn't even lasted 6 months longer than her own life.
And then you spent how many years trying, working with Sandra and Norma to try and get the Supreme Court to overturn Roe and Doe? How many years was that of battle going
About
on?
2000 to 2012, both of the ladies were still alive, and we began working for them in 2000. And one of the things we did that was different was to collect the testimonies of women hurt by abortion.
Right, which we've helped with also.
Yes, absolutely, through Silent No More awareness campaign. Many of those women also joined the awareness public campaign, but they can also just give a legally admissible written document
To you.
that we use in courts all over the world. In fact, in the Dobbs case that reversed Roe v. Wade, we put 4,728 legally admissible written testimonies into that record. And over the years, the court and justices had referred to the actual testimony of women
Right.
for saying abortion is not as good as we thought it was.
Right.
In fact, they finally said it's not in the Constitution at all.
Yeah.
And I want to say this about Norma and Sandra's story. Norma actually started changing her mind when she began to work in an abortion clinic.
Right, because I remember her telling those stories. She said, "Oh, Janet, they wanted me to sell abortion, and I used to say to them, 'Now, you sure you want to do this?'" She was questioning the woman, and the abortion industry, the clinic workers, they didn't like that. The way she was questioning, "You sure you want to do this now? You know, once you do it, you can't undo it. You know, you sure you want to kill your baby?" She would use those words. They didn't like that.
That's
and then
right.
it was during that same period, next door was Flip Benham of Operation Rescue, and they befriended her and started talking to her. And before you know it, they took her to church one day, and it was a gradual transformation. And she said, "I can't work in that place anymore." And she went to them, and she became a Christian, and eventually a Catholic. I mean, it was a whole transformation of Norma. She really, total transformation.
And she spent the rest of her life. I met her in 2000, about 5 years after she'd been baptized on national TV, on ABC. But she was solidly committing. She and I traveled all around the world to like Ireland and Portugal and England and other places, as well as all over the United States, fighting against abortion.
Right.
Up until really, as far as I know, the end of her life, because shortly before she died, she told me she was doing a documentary, pro-life documentary, she called it. And she said, "Thank you, Alan, for trying to reverse Roe v. Wade,
Right.
even though we weren't successful while she was alive. But today, both Norma and Sandra have been vindicated. there is no right to abortion.
There is no right. I'm sure they're smiling down.
Yes.
But here we, brothers and sisters, this beautiful book Alan wrote, Reversing Roe, My Journey with Roe, Doe, and God. Alan, tell us, what did you do in this book? I mean, we just shared some essence of how we both know them and some true facts, but what did you share in this book?
It's really something that I think would encourage and inspire everybody who's pro-life. It's an amazing story about how God overturned Roe v. Wade. In the fullness of time, because millions of people were praying for it,
Right.
then God eventually says, we're going to put an end to this. And he called us in 2000 to represent the two ladies. That's when he kind of told us to collect the women's testimonies. And he kind of gave me a promise, you know, people, how you reach spiritual direction and ask God. He gave us Isaiah 28:14-22. He says, thus to the mocking judges who rule my people in Jerusalem, behold, you've made a covenant with death, an agreement with the grave.
Yeah.
And that's what Roe and Doe were, a covenant with death. And God says, I will rise up as at Mount Perazim, which means the Lord, the master of breakthroughs, and your covenant with death will be annulled, the agreement with the grave will not stand.
Right.
And so he then finally says, I'll do amazing, extraordinary things. And the book talks about the amazing, extraordinary things.
And they can get this book on your website, thejusticefoundation.org, right?
That's right.
That's where they can order a copy. I hope they do. And, you know, one final story I always tell people is there was the last 6 months or so of Norma's life, there seemed to be a lot of squabbling out there about her not being pro-life and going in the other direction. But I have a story, Alan, I think you've heard of this before. I was with Father Frank Pavone and Joan Lewis, who was the bureau chief for EWTN. We were in Rome in a car, traveling actually to Mass on a Saturday night. And Melissa, Norma's daughter, called us. Because at that point, Norma was in hospice and she was fading quickly. And Melissa said, Norma's not going to be here too much longer, but she wants to talk to you and Father Frank, just briefly. And she did, and she made us promise, please, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get Roe overturned. I want that done, please. And I said, Norma, I promise you, we will continue to work with all the other pro-life leaders. We will see an end to Roe v. Wade. We promise you that. And she died within 15 minutes later. Amazing. And so on June the 24th, 2022, I was actually in this very studio live, and people were there in Washington. And when that decision came down, I just looked up to the heaven and I said, Norma, promises kept.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Didn't you feel that way too? Because you too were the same being of promising we were going to keep working to do this, you know? Because both those ladies, they actually died young. They were, I think, in their late 60s when both passed. And we all made that promise. Don't worry, we're going to keep at it. And who knew? And we didn't know when that case from Mississippi started making, did we really think back then that that was going to overturn? We didn't, but God knew that he was going to use that as the vehicle. So, I mean, you know?
I would have to say, I always knew he was going to do amazing, extraordinary things. And you think about the election of Donald Trump, who would think a playboy from New York would become the most pro-life president in American history?
That's right.
He got 3 nominees and confirmations to the Supreme Court.
Well, that's why, Alan.
It's amazing.
I heard a preacher preach the day of his inauguration in a church in D.C., and he said, Donald Trump is the 45th president of the United States, and he is an Isaiah 45 president. So say about Isaiah 45.
Isaiah 45 talks about Cyrus, a prince or king of Persia at one time, who helped restore the Jewish people to their homeland.
Right.
And in that Isaiah passage, it particularly says that he'll be given the gates of bronze. And as a lawyer who practices in the Supreme Court all the time, we know the doors are bronze there.
Yes.
And he also says that he will establish life and be a life-affirming president. So a lot of people called him a Cyrus, and then he eventually established the Embassy of the United States in Jerusalem.
That's right.
Where it ought to be.
He kept a promise that other presidents said they were going to do and didn't do, and he did it.
Yes.
So, well, this is a great book. I got my copy. I can't wait to read it. So, Alan, thank you for joining us.
God bless you.
God bless you. Well, brothers and sisters, you have your marching orders now. This is a fantastic book so much information, but from a God perspective, from a lawyer who fought for those two ladies to overturn Roe and Doe. You can get your copy, like I said, at thejusticefoundation.org. I hope you do it today. And remember, knowledge is power. And when you know your information, there are going to be some abortions only you can stop. Therefore, some lives only you can save. Join us again next time. Thank you, and God bless.